Chapter 534. The others were shocked by Eunuch Mu's ruthlessness. Even if they were going to be sent away, the words of begging for mercy were stuck in their throats. Because intuition told them that if they opened their mouths at this time, they would definitely not have a good end. They were afraid that they would be more miserable than those who were beaten up by Eunuch Mu, because they were not sensible. Eunuch Mu was satisfied with the cleverness of this group of people, but he still looked at them as if he was looking at a group of dirty things. It seemed that his eyes would be dirty if he looked at them more. Send these people away immediately. Eunuch Mu ordered. There were many people in the prince's mansion, so naturally there were people to do all kinds of things. But as soon as this matter came out, those who still had thoughts in the prince's mansion all stopped. They couldn't climb up the ladder of riches and honor. Instead, they completely lost it. It was really not worth the loss. It should be known that in Prince Jin's mansion, as long as they were obedient, they could live more comfortably than any other mansion in the capital. The monthly salary was also first class. Now that the princess was pregnant, in order to accumulate blessings for the child, they just drove those people out. If there were still people who made trouble, it would not be so simple. This incident wasn't a small one, but it wasn't a big one either. However, there were a lot of people, and they didn't use any special methods to send them away. Someone was bound to notice it. Hence, Jingwan was once again pushed to the heart of the storm after this incident. Jealousy, viciousness, nothing more than these. In Jingwan's case, this was not the first time. After a period of time, it stopped. Even Jingwan herself, after listening to it, there was nothing new. Even if the world knew that Jin Xinwang loved Jin Xinwang Fei, it was because he did not want anyone else. But as long as there was no one else by his side, then Jingwan was destined to always bear the name of jealousy. This name, perhaps, would fade after many years. Lu Qingdi also heard some of it. At first, he was very satisfied with Jingwan because she was the only one around Li Hongyuan. But now that Jingwan was pregnant, the most Lu Qingdi could do was to send 2 palace maids. He couldn't do anything more. Moreover, he really couldn't get involved in Li Hongyuan's affairs. He was helpless about this. As a father, he was not willing to admit it, but this was the truth. The matters in the northwest were almost done. There were still some small follow-up matters that could only be done slowly. Lu Qingdi didn't care about those matters anymore. What he cared about was Fu Yunting. However, after Fu Yunting came back, he delegated his power very straightforwardly. Now, he was purely an idler and didn't leave the house easily. Even if Lu Qingdi wanted to find trouble, he couldn't do it. He was originally a person with a good reputation. In this situation, even if he wanted to put a groundless charge on someone who didn't care about his reputation, he probably wouldn't succeed. Therefore, Lu Qingdi could only grit his teeth. In addition, Lu Qingdi had always wanted to see the Imperial Gui Fei. Unfortunately, Great Master Liaochen had always avoided meeting him. Previously, he couldn't get away from the war. Now that there was nothing to do, Lu Qingdi felt as uncomfortable as a cat. He sent people to White Dragon Temple again and again. It was obvious that if Great Master Liaochen kept delaying the meeting, Lu Qingdi would flip out sooner or later. Even if Great Master Liaochen was an eminent monk with a reputation all over the world, he wasn't afraid of offending the emperor. Perhaps it wouldn't be difficult for him to escape. However, there were many people in White Dragon Temple, and they weren't like Great Master Liaochen. Therefore, they would have to meet sooner or later. However, the living king of hell had the final say on when to meet. It wasn't that Great Master Liaochen was under Li Hongyuan's control. The main reason was that the living king of hell was too cruel. Great Master Liaochen was merciful and afraid that he would make a big move at the slightest provocation. Therefore, Great Master Liaochen let him do as he pleased on trivial matters. When Lu Qingdi sent people to White Dragon Temple again, Great Master Liaochen finally agreed to come to the capital. Lu Qingdi, who got the news first, was in a state of excitement. Of course, he was also uneasy. After all, he was the one who killed her. Lu Qingdi denied this to the world and couldn't distort the truth in front of the person involved. Great Master Liaochen stayed in the palace for 3 days. Lu Qingdi built a temple especially for him. Speaking of which, although the imperial noble consort, lived in Qin Shufei's body and didn't affect her, she was still a spirit. If Great Master Liaochen wanted her to show her physical body, it would be best to do it in the middle of the 7th month, when the yin qi was at its thickest. However, Great Master Liaochen was different. He didn't specially prepare anything and didn't choose the middle of the 7th month. Lu Qingdi was burning with impatience. Great Master Liaochen fulfilled his wish and told Lu Qingdi that any time was fine. This time, Lu Qingdi hesitated. After careful consideration, he decided on a certain night. He even had someone call Li Hongyuan and Jing Wan into the palace. Presumably, he was afraid that the imperial noble consort wouldn't see him. If his son was present, the imperial noble consort would have some misgivings. This way, with a good start, the rest would be easier to deal with. It wasn't that Li Hongyuan hadn't seen the imperial noble consort before, but that was when she was dying in her previous life. He didn't pay much attention to her condition then. The last time he met her, she was using Qin Shufei's body. As such, Li Hongyuan was also a little interested in meeting her. In comparison, Jingwan was more interested. She was once recognized as the #1 beauty. When she passed away, she was only in her early 20s. She was in the prime of her life, and her beauty must have been at its peak. https://11/11/14399-14343. Chapter 535. Master Liaochen's business as a charlatan was undoubtedly brilliant. However, wasn't Taoism more professional? Did Master Liaochen cross over into another profession, or was he developing in many different fields? She didn't know how it would begin or what the process would be. Jingwan sat beside Li Hongyuan and began to daydream. When she thought of the imperial noble consort, she felt an inexplicable sense of nervousness, like an ugly daughter-in-law meeting her parents-in-law. She was thinking too much, but because no one would pay attention to her. Her husband? That didn't matter. He had seen all kinds of things. As a result, Jingwan's expression changed unpredictably. Speaking of which, this was probably a negative attribute that appeared after Jingwan became pregnant. She could do whatever she wanted and naturally didn't have to deliberately control her expression. Li Hongyuan glanced sideways at Jingwan. He had seen Jingwan's new attribute before. He reached out and pinched Jingwan's face, bringing Jingwan back to reality. Jingwan looked at Li Hongyuan in confusion. What's wrong? Jingwan didn't realize it herself, but in Li Hongyuan's eyes, his wife had become dull after becoming pregnant. However, this wasn't too serious. It only appeared occasionally and wouldn't be noticed if one didn't pay attention. However, this small flaw in Li Hongyuan's eyes was an unexpected attraction. It could be considered as compensation for his grievances. Just as Li Hongyuan was about to speak, a sudden gust of wind blew through the open door. It reminded Jingwan of a certain scene in a novel. However, she didn't feel cold. A cool summer breeze was quite comfortable. However, did this mean that the heavenly beauty was about to appear? Jingwan's gaze turned to Master Liaochen. It seemed that he had been sitting there chanting all this time. Apart from that, he hadn't done anything else. Could it be that just by doing this, he could make the spirit that lived in someone else's body leave the body and manifest itself? That's amazing, my Master Liaochen. Jingwan looked at the door again. Then, suddenly, a blurry figure appeared at the door. Jingwan was shocked and sat up straight subconsciously. Li Hongyuan, who was originally looking at her, also glanced at the door because of her reaction. Then, he changed his posture slightly and looked at the figure at the door that was becoming more and more solid. When it came to ghosts and monsters, most people were afraid. However, the person who appeared now truly looked like a fairy who had walked out from the moonlight. She carried a trace of coldness and was otherworldly. She really didn't look like a mortal. However, perhaps it was because she wasn't a human in the first place. How could such a ghost inspire fear in people? Jingwan discovered that her husband's facial features had really inherited his mother's. It was no wonder that he was recognized as the most handsome man in the capital. The reason why he was only known in the capital was because his activities were basically in the capital. Not many people had seen him. Moreover, As a member of the royal family, ordinary people didn't dare to talk about him casually. Therefore, his good name naturally wouldn't spread widely. Jingwan thought that she had seen many beauties, but at this moment, she seemed to be stunned. Li Honyuan also looked at the imperial noble consort. However, he didn't have much of a reaction. The only thought in his mind was that the person he saw before he died in his previous life was indeed her. He retracted his gaze and inadvertently looked at Jingwan's face. TSK, his wife was actually stunned by a woman. Even if that woman was his mother, it wouldn't do. He reached out and pinched Jingwan's face again. And this scene happened to fall into the eyes of the imperial noble consort. Seeing how close her son was to her daughter-in-law, she naturally couldn't help but raise a light smile. And with this smile, the cold feeling on her body disappeared without a trace. What was left was a fairy who had been touched by the smoke and fire of the mortal world. The sense of distance reduced, and she was gentle and amiable. Jingwan was disturbed from looking at the beauty, so she was naturally a little unhappy. However, when she saw her husband's face become even darker, she immediately added a comforting smile. Our Yuan is the most handsome in the world. Li Hongyuan's face became even darker. At the same time, there was a burst of laughter from the side. The husband and wife both looked over. The imperial noble consort, who was at the door just now, was now only 3 steps away. Jingwan was a little embarrassed. There was no other way. This was a real mother-in-law, and a beauty who was so beautiful that she didn't dare to blaspheme. She hurriedly stood up. As a result, Li Honyuan and the imperial noble consort reached out at almost the same time. One helped her, but the other's hand went through her arm. Slow down. Don't be so impatient. Li Honyuan frowned slightly. The imperial noble consort looked at her hand, and a flash of sadness appeared on her face. Then she smiled and said, Yuan is right. Wan, you're pregnant now. Slow down a bit. It's for the child and for you. Jingwan's face was a little red. She was ashamed of her weak performance. Yes, Mufei, daughter-in-law, will remember. The imperial noble consort was very happy with how Jingwan addressed her. Li Honyuan also stood up straight at this moment. Mufei, although the imperial noble consort looked very young, in fact, she was 20 years old, but she had a 25-year-old son. However, Li Honyuan didn't feel that he couldn't say it. It was just a form of address. Yuana, the imperial noble consort's face seemed to be a little sad. However, perhaps because of her soul, it was far less intense than when she took over Qin Shufei's body. She clearly had deep feelings, but there was no palpitations or tears. For the imperial noble consort, this was also an extreme sadness. The scene fell into silence for a while. https://11/11/11807/14550503. Chapter 536. Yes. Lu Qingdi was excited and anxious, careful and timid. Maybe he was a little unhappy that the imperial noble consort looked at her son and daughter-in-law first instead of him. However, this last emotion was not obvious. He might not have noticed it himself, but it didn't mean that others didn't. As a murderer, you didn't feel any guilt or self-reproach in front of the deceased. How could you be unhappy because you weren't the first person she looked at? It's not like I love you so much that I'm still thinking about you even after you've been dead for so many years. Even if it's true love, only an idiot would put you first after you've killed him. To be honest, even if I put you first, it should be because of hatred. I'm already giving you a lot of face by not pouncing on you and snapping your neck the moment I appeared. The imperial noble consort turned her face and looked at Lu Qingdi quietly. Lu Qingdi, who had raised his hand to touch her, froze under her gaze. He became more and more uncomfortable, and the excitement in his eyes was colored with a different color. Yes. His lips moved and his hands trembled again. The imperial noble consort squatted, Your Majesty. She was graceful and her movements were still textbook standard. Lu Qingdi subconsciously reached out to help her, but he missed. His hand passed through the imperial noble consort's arm. Lu Qingdi was stunned, and there was a moment of blankness on his face. He looked at the imperial noble consort, as if he hadn't realized what was going on. However, when Lu Qingdi reacted like this, Jingwan clearly saw that the imperial noble consort's hand that was touched shrank, and the other hand brushed it away. It could be seen that she disliked Lu Qingdi's approach, even if she didn't feel it physically. If it weren't for Li Hongyuan and Jingwan, she might have made it very obvious. Jingwan's understanding of the imperial noble consort was based on what others said. She was all good, good-looking, good-tempered, well-cultivated kind. In short, she was perfect in every way. But now, it didn't seem to be the case. Speaking of which, even a clay figurine had a temper. Being good-tempered didn't mean that she didn't have a temper. The imperial noble consort was not a saint. How could she not have any negative feelings for the enemy that she robbed and killed? In the imperial noble consort's heart, it was normal that she wanted to chop Lu Qingdi into pieces. Disgust was too light. Of course, there was another possibility, which was that the imperial noble consort didn't care about life and death at all. Based on this, she didn't have any hatred for Lu Qingdi, who killed her. However, the imperial noble consort died before the child was born. So, more hatred came from this. No matter how much Lu Qingdi favored Li Hongyuan after that, he also deprived him of the most important thing. A woman could have no ambition, but she would never allow her child to be bullied. So, the imperial noble consort could maintain her current state because she was calm. It could only mean that she had reached the realm of not showing her emotions. Thinking about it, although the imperial noble consort died early, whether it was the Pei family or Lu Qingdi later, she could be said to have been well protected. However, she learned a lot of things that she should learn. And in the next 10 years, she got along with Qin Shufei. So, she must have been greatly influenced by Qin Shufei. The most powerful women in the imperial harem were 3, not 2. It would be strange if the imperial noble consort was not scheming and shrewd. Yes, the imperial noble consort smiled softly. Your Majesty, I can't be here for long. Let me and Yuan talk to his wife first. Then I will talk to your Majesty. Then she looked directly at Jingwan and Li Hongyuan. Obviously, she just wanted to inform Lu Qingdi, not to get his consent. Even if she annoyed Lu Qingdi, the imperial noble consort obviously wouldn't care. She was already dead, so she didn't have so many scruples. However, the imperial noble consort, who had a lot to say, didn't know what to say to her son now. Her eyes fell on Jingwan. I know that Wan is a good child. It's Yuan's blessing to marry you. I only hope that you can go forward hand in hand and never leave each other. Then she looked at Li Hongyuan. I didn't fulfill my duty. I'm sorry, but what's the use of saying this now? So, I only hope that you'll be well. The imperial noble consort paused and smiled. All right, you can leave first. I'll talk to your imperial father. Li Hongyuan didn't say anything. He glanced at the imperial noble consort and said, This son will take his leave. Then he left with Jingwan, who didn't have time to greet him. After Jingwan left, she saw Master Liaochen twirling his Buddhist prayer beads and looking up at the sky. She didn't know when this great trickster came out, but the family was reunited, so he really had nothing to do with it. But Jingwan didn't have the desire to speak at this moment. She glanced at the room from time to time. This place was very quiet at this moment. Even the palace guards and Lu Qingdi's eunuchs were relatively far away. Li Hongyuan reached out and put his palm on Jingwan's face. He used a little force to make her look at him. Are you that curious? Jingwan smiled embarrassedly. I really want to know what they're talking about. All right, they were husband and wife. Even if they were enemies, Lu Qingdi didn't think so. What else could they be talking about? They're just pouring out their hearts and promising to be together in the next life. That's all. At first, Jingwan wanted to refute, but after he finished speaking, Jingwan understood what he meant. For the imperial noble consort, it was fake to confess her feelings. It was real to make Lu Qingdi feel guilty and painful. But the real purpose was to gain more weight for her son. At this time, it was the stupidest thing to do to make a scene with Lu Qingdi and pursue Lu Qingdi's mistakes. https://11/11807/1455050 539. Chapter 537. It had to be said that Li Hongyuan's understanding of his own mother was very limited. However, this limited understanding was enough to capture the essence of the imperial noble consort. Or rather, it was the essence that many mothers shared. "Master, how long will mother last?" 15 minutes at most, Master Liaochen answered honestly. Jinghua nodded. She didn't care much about this point. The imperial noble consort had passed away. Under these circumstances, it was already a blessing to be able to see her. She was probably the only person in the world who was so lucky. Then, based on the imperial noble consort's current situation, how long will she last? The 81 altars had cost a lot of manpower and money. There were also many twists and turns in the process. Wasn't it all to prevent the imperial noble consort from disappearing so early? Master Liaochen didn't think much of Jingwan's understanding of this matter. He was very calm. Originally, if nothing unexpected happened, the imperial noble consort would have disappeared when His Highness passed away. However, it didn't go so smoothly. Therefore, the imperial noble consort's time will be reduced. The exact time is uncertain, but a few years is enough. Jingwan didn't know what to say. After all, only the person involved had the most right to speak in this matter. Emotionally, Jingwan felt sorry for the imperial noble consort. However, there was nothing more. Li Honyuan himself didn't do everything based on feelings. It was an exchange. They did a lot of things, but in reality, it didn't take much effort. Thus, whether the imperial noble consort existed or not, and how long she wanted to live, was the most important thing. Li Honyuan reached out and held Jingwan's hand. "We've done what we should." "Ba," Master Liaochen said. Jingwan felt that there was a deeper meaning to this ba. It also felt like it was purely a catchphrase. As for the imperial noble consort, just as Li Honyuan said, when she deliberately catered to Lu Chengdi was easily controlled by her. Of course, her previous attitude was there. Even if the imperial noble consort wanted to do something, she would not go too far. Anyway, she was a soul now. Lu Chengdi could not touch her at all. At most, he would say a few soft words. The imperial noble consort sensed that it was about time for her to appear. "Your Majesty, it's about time for Qin Xie to appear. May your Majesty take care of your dragon body." "That's enough. Qinjin, see you again?" Lu Chengdi wanted to touch the imperial noble consort again and again, but he failed again and again. However, Lu Chengdi was unwilling to give up. The person he had been thinking about day and night was right in front of him. She was no different from a living person. She was the same as the one in his memory. But why couldn't he touch her? This was why people were so greedy. When he didn't know that she was still alive, he pretended to be a lover in front of a few tattered portraits. When he knew that she was still alive, he wanted to see her so that he could die in peace. But when he saw her, he wanted to touch her and make her stay. In short, he couldn't wait to erase all the unhappiness in the past and reconcile with her. The imperial noble consort shook her head. Qin Xie has no more regrets to be able to see His Majesty and Yuan her. Qin Xie is already luckier than many people. Qin Xie cannot hope for the next time. If there is an afterlife, it must be a life and death enemy, the kind that would never let go. The imperial noble consort didn't finish her words, but the expression on her face was completely different. There was a bit of sorrow and reluctance. She had a good sense of propriety. Lu Chengdi naturally imagined a lot of things. He couldn't wait to go to the netherworld with the imperial noble consort and be reincarnated together. In the next life, they would be childhood sweethearts and innocent lovers. Then, they would naturally get married. The more he thought about it, the more excited he couldn't help trembling. It seemed that he even forgot his current identity. "That's enough. If there is an afterlife, your Majesty shouldn't grow up in the imperial family." Lu Chengdi's original strange excitement stagnated at this time. The imperial noble consort smiled, but it was a little bleak. "Your Majesty, people's hearts are made of flesh. Your Majesty once treated this concubine very well. This concubine has seen it all and will remember it in my heart. It's just that people are always greedy." She paused. "To have a pair for a lifetime, it's really too greedy. Your Majesty, Yuan Er's relationship with his wife is good now. I don't know how far Yuan Er can go, but I still hope that someone can get what I can't get. At least, let me believe that some things in this world are still possible. I don't care what will happen to Yuan Er in the future. I just hope that your majesty won't interfere in the matter between them. I'll take my leave. After the imperial noble consort finished speaking, her figure faded quickly and disappeared without a trace. That's enough. Lu Qingdi subconsciously reached out to grab her. Wait for me. I promise you anything. The imperial noble consort stopped in her ears and didn't say anything. Because others couldn't see, her expression became silent. She stood in front of Lu Qingdi. She knew very well that this man was just impulsive. The imperial noble consort didn't believe what he said at all. The imperial noble consort wasn't a person who thought highly of herself. However, she was actually very disdainful of Lu Qingdi. It should be said that she looked down on men like Lu Qingdi. There was an invisible force on her body. The imperial noble consort knew that it came from Qin Shufei. In the past, when she could still leave her body, this kind of force existed. The imperial noble consort didn't reject this kind of control by others situation. She turned and left directly. As for the promise to Lu Qingdi, even if it was a lie, the imperial noble consort felt at ease. She wasn't worried that her words would come true at all because she knew that she wouldn't be reincarnated. Although Li Honyuan didn't mention this problem at the beginning and Qin Shufei didn't know, the imperial noble consort always had a strong intuition about herself. Perhaps because they heard Lu Qingdi's suddenly raised voice, Jingwan and Li Honyuan looked at each other and walked into the room hand in hand. However, before they reached the door, Li Honyuan stopped in his tracks. Even Jingwan stopped in her tracks. She's gone. Jingwan also guessed that the imperial noble consort might have left. However, her husband's reaction seemed a little different. Just now, we should have passed through her body. Jingwan paused. Although she didn't feel anything, she still felt a little goosebumps when she thought of passing through a ghost body. Li Honyuan pulled Jingwan and turned around. It looked like he was preparing to leave the palace. He didn't appear for his so-called imperial father. Now that he couldn't see the real person, what was the point of staying? As for asking Lu Qingdi to leave, it was no joke. His good imperial father was still reminiscing about his mother. He was a considerate and filial son. When he shouldn't disturb him, he would be 100% considerate. When Lu Qingdi came out in a daze, he seemed to wake up a little when he saw Master Liaochen. However, other than Master Liaochen, there was no one else. Even so, Lu Qingdi didn't dare to put on the airs of an emperor in front of Master Liaochen. First, Master Liaochen was unpredictable. Second, he needed his help. Master, Lu Qingdi called out hesitantly. Master Liaochen turned around and gave a Buddhist bow. Amipa, Your Majesty, it's better to be open-minded about some things. Lu Qingdi's lips trembled. According to Master Liaochen, we really can't interfere anymore. Your Majesty, there are some things that can't be done the first time. Master Liaochen's words were very direct. Lu Qingdi instantly became dispirited. Master Liaochen didn't plan to stay any longer. He bid farewell to Lu Qingdi and prepared to leave the palace tomorrow to return to White Dragon Temple. Many people didn't sleep well that night. Many people knew about the imperial noble consort when she was still alive. They tried to stop her during the ritual, but they didn't succeed. Those who should know also knew about what happened tonight. A person that they couldn't see had a lot of information that could be used against them. Not only that, she also won Lu Qingdi's heart. Even if she didn't have any information, she could make up something that could be used against them. It was enough to make them suffer. However, even if they knew, they couldn't stop her. They could only wait impatiently. They all stared at the sky until dawn. Their eyes were bloodshot from excessive heat. There was supposed to be morning court today, but it was canceled because the emperor wasn't feeling well. https://11/11/14807/14577135 Mobile Edition. Chapter 538. This seemed to be expected. None of the courtiers had any objection. They all left, and went to their own offices to deal with today's official affairs. Similarly, no one asked to see Lu Qingdi. As courtiers, they should be sensible when they should be. If they went up at this time, it would be annoying instead of flattering him. However, even though they were working in their own places, their hearts were not at peace. Lu Qingdi did not attend court 3 times in a row. In total, it had been more than 10 days. The courtiers did not see him. Even if it was to cherish the memory of his beloved, it was too long. The courtiers would not allow it. Therefore, they jointly asked to see Lu Qingdi. Fortunately, Lu Qingdi seemed to have come out at this time, so they did not worry much. However, this did not mean that they could sit back and relax. They were all waiting for Lu Qingdi's action. In other words, they were waiting for the thing hanging above their heads to fall down. They wanted to see whether it was a lethal weapon or something that they did not need to care about at all. Lu Qingdi did take action, but he only gave Prince Jin a lot of rewards and did not show any other expression. Many people heaved a sigh of relief. Obviously, these people had done something shameful. However, even if they were relieved, it did not mean that they were completely relieved. After all, no one knew whether Lu Qingdi would hold back and make a move in the dark. After all, the power of the imperial court was divided by several princes. No matter who was attacked, the whole situation would be affected. Even if it was Prince Rue, who still looked like a cripple, who could guarantee that he was really harmless? It was just because Lu Qingdi had solid evidence. No matter what these people thought, it would not affect Jingwan and Li Hongyuan. After all, the appearance of the imperial noble consort was like a protective talisman for them. Although it seemed that it was just icing on the cake, it could also save them a lot of small troubles. If small troubles kept coming, it would make people very angry. In fact, all parties knew what position Prince Jin was in now. Therefore, no one would foolishly look for trouble at this time. Otherwise, it would definitely cause the emperor to be furious. Even if the officials in the court took sides, who would be able to oppose Lu Qingdi directly? No matter how mediocre he was, he still held great power. As the saying goes, when the emperor is angry, millions of corpses will fall. In this way, it gave Jingwan a peaceful environment to nurture the fetus. Jingwan suspected that her husband had delayed the emperor's meeting with the imperial Gui Fei for this purpose. Did that mean that he already had a plan to get pregnant? Then, her husband's feelings for that child seemed to be more complicated than she had expected. At this time, Jingwan got the news that Duchess Ding was gone. Jingwan was immediately startled. Her heart was a little complicated. To be honest, Duchess Ding was not a likable person, but she was Sun Yijia's mother. Even if Sun Yijia had a bad relationship with her, it was mainly later. Sun Yijia must have feelings for her. Moreover, it was because of Sun Yilin that she fell ill. She couldn't deny her love for Sun Yilin. However, this kind of love was obviously too much. The strong desire for control made the relationship between mother and son worse and worse, to the point that there was no room for recovery. In the end, she was Duchess Ding, so the prince's residents should go and offer their condolences. On one hand, Jingwan was worried about Sun Yijia. On the other hand, she couldn't help but think of Sun Yilin. He was also a righteous and upright person. The last time she saw him, he was still on the road to Jiangnan. After being an official for a few years, he must have changed. She just didn't know if the change was big. There was a trace of curiosity in her heart, but she quickly threw it to the back of her mind. How he was had nothing to do with her. In addition, there was a super vinegar jar, so even if it was purely out of curiosity, it was better not to ask. Jingwan first sent someone to see Sun Yijia. She learned that although Sun Yijia's spirit was not very good, it was not too bad. After all, she was a pregnant woman. The people around her would definitely try their best to comfort her. This was not a burial in a day or two. Moreover, even if they came to offer their condolences, it would be done in batches. Jingwan and Li Hongyuan's time was neither the first nor the last. In fact, they just went through the motions and offered an incense stick. Given Jingwan's current situation, Li Hongyuan naturally did not allow her to stay in Duke Ding's mansion for long. However, coincidentally, when they left Duke Ding's mansion, they happened to meet Sun Yijia, who came back in a hurry. When they met head-on, the atmosphere was a little tense. The The living hell could hardly control his emotions. He looked at Sun Yilin as if there were knives in his eyes. Jingwan just glanced at Sun Yilin. To be honest, if she hadn't heard the words of the servants of Duke Ding's mansion, she wouldn't have recognized him at all. Sun Yilin's face was obviously wrapped in layers of white cloth. It was obvious that he was injured. Moreover, his whole spirit was different. His gentle aura was gone, and he seemed colder, even with a trace of gloominess. Even his figure had changed a little. Of course, this was not surprising. After all, he was only 20 years old. It was normal for some changes to be made in 2 or 3 years. Jingwan was a little shocked. She didn't know what had happened to him, but her attention was first on the man beside her. She was afraid that he would make trouble if he didn't agree with her. https://11/11/11807/14607221 HTML. Chapter 539. Sun Yilin probably didn't expect to see Jingwan so unexpectedly. He was travel-worn and in such a sorry state. Jingwan could choose to be wary of her husband and treat him as a passerby, but he obviously couldn't face Jingwan calmly. It could only be said that from the beginning, Jingwan had become a cinnabar in his heart. Even if he cut it out, it would leave a scar that wouldn't disappear for the rest of his life. Moreover, for him, it was impossible to cut it out. At least, he hadn't succeeded for a few years, and it became more and more deep-rooted. It could be said that Sun Yilin's current situation was the result of Li Hongyuan's calculation. But don't forget that at the beginning, Li Hongyuan thought highly of him and was ready to put him in an important position like in the previous life. He even solved the regret in his heart to protect his beloved sister. Now Sun Yilin's life was happy. Her husband's family elders treated her well. Her husband's career, fame, and wealth, but she was the only one. Many people were envious and jealous. It was just that Sun Yilin fell in love with Jingwan first. Li Hongyuan was just pushing the boat with the current. To be honest, even if Li Hongyuan didn't exist, there might not be a good result if he and Jingwan got together. He had such a mother who deliberately made things difficult for him. Then, the possibility of Sun Yilin not being schemed against was zero. Jingwan was soft on the outside, but tough on the inside. Once Sun Yilin had another woman, it would definitely be over between the two of them. In the end, Sun Yilin was still under too many shackles. Even if he was the #1 young master in the capital, he was still in the palm of someone else's hand. This point had nothing to do with age. If it were now, perhaps it would be different. After all, he could barely control his own life now. However, this assumption obviously didn't exist. Jingwan was not dead set on him, nor was she unable to get married. Without that living king of hell who tried to change many things, it would be someone else. Before falling in love with Li Hongyuan, Jingwan was always rational. She knew that it was inevitable that she would get married when she reached the age. Li Hongyuan saw through this very clearly, so he could easily get rid of Sun Yilin, who was originally a rather threatening love rival. Actually, he had spent quite a bit of effort on Chun Jungmin. Although Sun Yilin had changed a lot, but the upbringing in his bones still existed. Moreover, as someone who had mingled in the officialdom for a few years and was still alone in a foreign land, some things should be obliterated, some things should be infected, to be able to maintain one's original heart. It could be said that there were not many that could be found. From Sun Yilin's changes, it could be seen that at least he was not in this category. Therefore, no matter how impatient he was when he met Jin Qinhuang, it was very wrong to just stand there and stare blankly. Sun Yilin reached out to cover his face. There was no emotion in his eyes. It was full of indifference. It was just that his whole person seemed to be fixed and somewhat stiff. The people who were looking at him were not in the minority. To be honest, if it wasn't for the manservant who was following him and the feeling of familiarity, these people really didn't dare to believe that this was the same person. In the past, when the servants talked about this person with their heads held high and their chests puffed out, the difference was really too big. In the end, what happened? This change was no longer surprising, but it was unbelievable. Darren, Sun Yilin's manservant cautiously called out. Sun Yilin returned to his senses and put down his hand. Turning a blind eye to the people around him, he walked straight into the Fu. The deeper he went, the more people he met. And those people, whether it was servants, guests, or even the masters of Duke Ding's Fu, their first reaction was, "Who was this person, ah?" However, because he had entered the gates of Duke Ding's Fu, he should be a guest. At first, he just asked about the location of the morning hall. This was a place where he had lived for more than 10 years, so naturally, he didn't need anyone to lead the way. There were not many people in the morning hall, but there were also quite a few people. Sun Yijia and Luo Jinghua were both there. Soon, people noticed Sun Yilin one after another. As for his manservant, obviously, this was not a place where he could come in. Therefore, no one recognized him at first. No, it should be that they even guessed who he was. Sun Yilin stared fixedly at the morning hall. Now, he could only see a coffin. If Sun Yilin wanted to see it again, he could only wait until the burial. His expression was still visible on his face, or rather, his emotions. His whole person was stiff and numb. At this moment, Sun Yilin thought a lot, but it seemed that he wasn't thinking about anything at all. It seemed that he was deeply guilty and blamed himself for his mother's death. After all, when Duchess Ding fell ill, he did play a big part in it. However, it seemed that it had nothing to do with him at all. He stood on the sidelines and watched indifferently. Sun Yilin was really strange now. As a master of Duke Ding's Fu, especially Sun Yilin's brother, he couldn't let this situation continue. Just as he was about to step forward, Sun Yijia moved first. She hurriedly stepped forward, but stopped when she was 3 steps away. She cautiously and timidly said, "Fifth brother?" Sun Yilin finally reacted. He looked at Sun Yijia. Perhaps it was because she was his most beloved sister, but he forced a smile. It seemed that he hadn't smiled for so long that he didn't know how to smile. Little sister. After confirming his identity, Sun Yijia's tears immediately rolled down. Her eyes were also full of disbelief. "Fifth brother, what happened to you? How did you become like this?" "Don't worry. I'm fine. It's just an accident." Sun Yilin tried to say it as casually as possible. How could he be fine? He looked terrible at first glance. Sun Yijia stepped forward and reached out her trembling hand. Sun Yilin avoided it and glanced at her belly. "You're pregnant now. I didn't wash up. I'm not clean. https:///11/11807/1462627. Chapter 540. After burning the incense, Sun Yilin seemed to have become a wooden stake again, looking at the spark at the top of the incense. And this time was enough for the people around to come back to their senses. It was really hard to describe their feelings. Some were sympathetic, some were sad, some were indifferent, and some were gloating. Sun Yibin, who had been the fiercest with Sun Yilin, obviously belonged to the last situation. In his eyes, Sun Yilin occupied his mother's attention when he was born, and as he slowly grew up, his younger brother's infinite talent made all the brothers in Ding General Manor pale in comparison. When it came to Ding General Manor, it seemed that only Sun Yilin was mentioned. If it was just this, it would have been fine. He was the eldest legitimate son and should be the legitimate heir, but the emperor, who was indifferent to the whole Sun family, also liked this younger brother very much. For him, the emperor suppressed him and did not confer the title of heir. How could he not be jealous? How could he not hate him? When his younger brother was only a few years old, he almost killed him. Sun Yibin did not regret it at all. Anyway, even if he really died, even if they knew it was him who did it, his parents would cover it up for him. After all, Ding General Manor was the head of the nobility. Face was very important. Unfortunately, why didn't he die? Since then, his mother had protected his younger brother so tightly that he had no chance to kill him. He had always been a thorn in his side, but he could do nothing to him. His grandmother had adopted him. To some extent, it could be said that he was no longer a threat to him. But in his heart, he was not very happy because his grandmother's essential purpose was still Sun Yilin. His grandmother regarded them as a burden to her younger brother. The whole Ding General Manor was not a symbol of high status and wealth, but a pile of filth. How could he not be angry? However, this younger brother was far away in Jiangnan. Ding General Manor was high and powerful, but he didn't even have the status of a legitimate heir. How could he mobilize people to make trouble for Sun Yilin? It was really beyond his reach. Now he was back, and came back in such a ghastly appearance. Haha, fifth brother, you still know to come back? I sent you a letter so early, but you just came back to the capital now. Mother valued and loved you the most. Not only did she fall ill because of your marriage, but she also insisted on leaving the capital. It was fine if she couldn't come back after leaving the capital, but she didn't even send a letter. You don't know how sad she was. Before she died, all she wanted to do was to see you one last time, but in the end, she died with everlasting regret. Sun Yilin, did you know that Mother refused to close her eyes when she entered the coffin? The more Sun Yibin spoke, the angrier he became. The veins on his neck and the back of his hands were bulging, as if he was trying his best to suppress his anger. He glared at Sun Yilin, his eyes full of grief, as if he wanted to eat him alive. These words were not only to accuse Sun Yilin of being unfilial, but also to attribute the death of Duchess Ding's wife to Sun Yilin. The people present were not only from Ding General Manor. If these words were true, Sun Yilin would be drowned by their saliva. Everyone would only blame him and would never ask the reason. Besides, the marriage was originally arranged by the parents. Because of this, it was wrong for the children to be angry with their parents. And this was the worst part. What Sun Yibin said was not entirely false. Even though it was not entirely true, truth and falsehood were the most terrible thing. He was ruthless, but he also had a fatal weakness that he could use against Sun Yibin. Sun Yijia was unable to restrain her anger. This eldest brother always had such a disgusting face. Eldest brother, why are you slandering fifth brother like this? What are your intentions? I slandered him? There are quite a few people who know about this. Mother tried her best to suppress this matter because she was protecting him in every way possible. She was afraid that it would damage his reputation. In the end, he is just an ingrate, a heartless and ungrateful thing. You, little sister, Sun Yilin finally reacted. It's not good for people with two bodies to be angry. In Duke Ding's mansion, we are only guests with 3 bodies. Your situation is special now, so you should go back. Otherwise, there are too many people coming and going. It won't be good if you offend them. Fifth brother. Sun Yijia looked at him in a daze. It was not for anything else, but was this really something her fifth brother would say? Before certain things, her fifth brother could be said to be obedient to her biological mother. What fifth brother? In our branch, there are only 2 of us. That's right, the brother and sister were adopted and given to their granduncle who died young. In theory, Sun Yilin's words were not wrong, but it could not be said like that. They were born and raised in Duke Ding's mansion. It was absolutely impossible to completely ignore Duke Ding's mansion, especially Sun Yilin. If he did not have the education of Duke Ding's mansion, how could he become the first young master in the capital? Sun Yilin had already slandered him. Once these words came out, he would be stabbed in the back. Didn't he see that Sun Yilin was trembling with excitement at this moment? Of course, Sun Yilin would only admit that he was trembling with anger. How could Sun Yilin not see the stakes in this? Of course not. To him, it was just that he didn't care at all. He had no future to speak of. In fact, he had no interest in being an official. The only thing he cared about now was his sister and grandmother. At a glance, he could tell that his sister was living well in the Luo family. As for his grandmother, no matter what, she was the old lord of Duke Ding's mansion. He didn't need to worry about her. He was alone in the world. What else did he care about his reputation? All right, let's go back. I'm going to pay my respects to grandmother, aunt, and then I'll look for you. I'm afraid I'll have to rely on you to help me while I'm in the capital. Sun Yilin patted Sun Yijia's shoulder and left the morning hall. https:///11/11/14807/146479121. Biku Pavilion M. Chapter 541. Luo Jingbo saw that Sun Yijia's expression was strange and hurried forward to support her. Yijia, what's wrong? Sun Yijia had a faint abdominal pain. She knew that she was too emotional and affected the child. She hurriedly tried to calm down and exhaled twice. I'm not feeling well. Let's go back. Okay. Luo Jinghua hurriedly nodded and carefully wiped away the tears on her face. Regardless of whether Sun Yijia was really feeling unwell or not, she was not only adopted but also a married daughter. She did not even need to observe mourning, let alone watch the coffin. At this moment, whether it was the Sun family or outsiders, they all remained silent. In fact, with Sun Yilin's explosive words blocking them, Sun Yijia could not even make a splash. Moreover, Sun Yijia was carrying the great-grandson of the Minister of Official Personnel Affairs. The Minister of Official Personnel Affairs was in a good position now. Although Ding General Manor had fallen because of Prince Rui and Prince Kong had taken the lead and seemed to be standing at the peak of power again, they still did not dare to confront the Minister of Official Personnel Affairs directly. If possible, they still wanted to rope him in. The relationship between the two families was not good. If something happened to Sun Yijia and Ding General Manor, the Minister of Official Personnel Affairs would not just simply laugh at it. The couple left with their servants, and the news about Sun Yilin spread quickly. Obviously, the higher Sun Yilin once stood, the worse he would be trampled on in the future. Compared to providing help in a time of need, there were more people who would hit him when he was down, especially many ignorant people who followed the crowd. Their greatest joy was to gossip about all kinds of things. Through subjective processing and speculation, they never considered the harm it would cause to the person involved. Sun Yilin went to see old Madam Sunday. The grandfather and grandson talked alone. It was not a long time, about a quarter of an hour. No one knew what they talked about, but after Sun Yilin came out, he finally seemed to have the aura of a human compared to the previous zombie-like appearance. The servants who served old Madam Sun had been serving her for a long time. Although old Madam Sun did not show her emotions, it did not mean that they could not sense it at all. Therefore, although old Madam Sun looked no different from usual, in fact, she was not in a good mood. It could even be said that she was in a very bad mood. This situation was not difficult to understand. One could tell just by looking at Sun Yilin's miserable appearance. Sun Yilin and Sun Yijia were old Madam Sun's two most beloved grandchildren. One must know that she was indifferent to her great-grandchildren. Sun Yilin had become like this. How could she not feel distressed? Several of the people who served her were also old. They had watched Sun Yilin grow up. Sometimes, they even boldly treated Sun Yilin as their junior. They were incomparably sad when they saw Sun Yilin, so one could imagine how old Madam Sun felt. They were very careful when they entered and exited. A few mothers wanted to persuade her, but they were actually the next generation of old Madam Sun's maidservants. When they served old Madam Sun had already experienced many ups and downs. She was calm and introverted. If there was anything, she would not tell them. Old Madam Sun had long been cold-hearted in Duke Dinghu's mansion. Therefore, even though these people had served her for 20 to 30 years, they were not close to her, let alone talk to her like sisters. Instead of comforting her, old Madam Sun probably hoped that no one would disturb her. What she needed was silence. This was indeed the case. If there was anyone who did not know what was good for them and came to her door at this moment, especially those who had certain thoughts and wanted to badmouth Sun Yilin in front of old Madam Sun, they would definitely be asking for trouble. Since Sun Yilin and Sun Yijia were adopted, Sun Yilin was naturally no longer so well off in terms of money. Of course, after going to Jiangnan, Sun Yilin deliberately reduced his food and clothing expenses. Facts proved that he could still live without the luxury of Duke Dinghu's mansion. Therefore, he could still live without the money of Duke Dinghu's mansion. When old Madam Sun adopted the brother and sister, she would not ignore the problem of settling down. Previously, Duke Dinghu's younger brother died young. He had no descendants, so naturally, there was no need to divide the family property. Now that there was someone in this branch, it was natural to divide the family property. Sun Yijia's dowry belonged to this family property. Therefore, old Madam Sun had clearly said that if anyone dared to cause trouble in the Luo family because of this, she would open the ancestral hall and expel them from the family. Suddenly, Some people's crooked thoughts were scattered. When Sun Yijia got married, she was the only legitimate daughter of Duke Dinghu's mansion. Moreover, her dowry was arranged according to the specifications of a princess. Although she later married Luo Jingbua and it was reduced a little, it was still very rich. It can make many people jealous and evil. She was not a noble daughter of Duke Dinghu's mansion, so naturally, she should take it back. Unfortunately, old Madame Sun saw through these little tricks at a glance and killed them directly from the source. In addition, she prepared a share for Sun Yilin. In fact, it was not much. It was far less than what would be given to a son of a concubine in Duke Dinghu's mansion in the future. Of course, the premise was that Duke Dinghu's mansion had not declined. Moreover, this family property was far less than the total value of Sun Yijia's dowry. However, in old Madame Sun's opinion, Sun Yijia would not care about this. He was capable and capable. As long as he stood out, these worldly possessions were nothing. Old Madame Sun adopted Sun Yilin, so simply because she wanted to protect Sun Yilin. After all, the current situation was there. She was not optimistic about Duke Dinghu's mansion. Once the fight for the throne failed, Duke Dinghu's mansion would definitely be thrown into the abyss. Sun Yilin distanced himself from Duke Dinghu's mansion. While protecting him to the greatest extent, it could also be considered as leaving a way out for Duke Dinghu's mansion. However, old Madame Sun, who was waiting for Sun Yilin's meteoric rise, probably did not expect that Sun Yilin would become like this today. In old Madame Sun's opinion, his face was still a small matter. The most important thing was his mental state. The extent of old Madame Sun's heartache was absolutely unimaginable to outsiders. It was just that Sun Yilin said, "Grandmother, I can't go back." Old Madame Sun did not say anything. She just closed her eyes in pain. "Go. Don't come back in the future." Her tone was not heavy, but Sun Yilin could feel his grandmother's deep disappointment in him. Sun Yilin kowtowed to old Madame Sunday. His departing figure was also exceptionally resolute. Old Madame Sun did not mention the inheritance that old Madame Sun prepared for him. Even if she did, Sun Yilin would not want it. Sun Yilin did as he said, and went to find Sun Yijia. Sun Yilin did not feel embarrassed about going to his younger sister and brother-in-law to take the autumn wind. Even if he was in such dire straits, in fact, he still had his own pride in his bones. He did not mind going to find Sun Yijia because she was his younger sister, the person closest to him. Therefore, he could be calm about many things. Sun Yijia controlled her emotions and also let the residence doctor take her pulse. Fortunately, there were no effects. However, she did not forget Sun Yilin's words. She reported this matter to old Madame Luo. Without Sun Yijia saying anything, old Madame Luo ordered people to clean up the guest room in the outer courtyard. As for whether Sun Yilin's reputation would be ruined in the future and whether it would affect the Luo family, old Madame Luo obviously did not care at all. This was because she had a balance in her heart. There were some things that she knew very well. Sun Yijia was very grateful to her grandmother for being so understanding and understanding. However, Sun Yijia still did not know her brother's specific plans. She also did not know the extent of the injuries on his face and whether it would affect his official career. For a moment, she was really troubled. However, she could only force herself to not think too much. She could not afford to worry now. Sun Yilin arrived at the Luo family's residence and washed up properly. He looked a little more spirited. He did not refuse the physician to take a look at the injuries on his face. In fact, he would not have known if he did not see it. He was shocked when he saw it. After removing the white cloth, the injuries looked pockmarked. Some areas seemed to have started to grow tender flesh, while some areas had some pus. It was painful to look at. However, Sun Yilin was expressionless. It was as if he did not feel pain at all. The residence doctor carefully treated him with the best medicine, the medicine that Jingwan usually sent over. "Young master, I'm afraid this is not the only injury on your body." Just now, the residence doctor carefully looked at the shape of Sun Yilin's injuries. "This injury does not look light. Young master, you should not hide it for fear of treatment. If you are worried about our third young mistress, you can rest assured that I will cover up for you in front of third young mistress." Sun Yilin was silent for a moment. Finally, he took off his clothes. Thank you. As for the wounds on Sun Yilin's body, he did not even bandage them. Perhaps he opened them when he was bathing, and it was not convenient for him to bandage them himself. However, it was obvious at a glance that although Sun Yilin had some scruples, he was not very careful. Some places were obviously wet. As a physician, he could not bear to see people like Sun Yilin who did not take care of his own body. Jingwan was more familiar with the Luo family's residence doctor. He was a conscientious old physician who did not speak much. At this moment, he was treating Sun Yilin's injuries while nagging. Sun Yilin was expressionless. He felt a little touched when he heard a stranger's concern, but more than that, he felt that it was ironic. After everything was treated, Sun Yilin looked more and more like the former first young master of the capital city. Especially in front of Sun Yijia, his expression softened. The residence doctor reduced Sun Yilin's injuries to 30%. When Sun Yijia heard this, she heaved a sigh of relief. Brother, how did you get this injury? This was what Sun Yijia was most concerned about. It was a fire. Sun Yilin only gave 2 words. He did not say anything else. Although Sun Yijia knew her brother's temperament, if there was something he did not want to say, he would definitely not say it. His attitude now clearly showed this. Brother, what are your plans in the future? Are you going back to Jiangnan or staying in the capital city? From Sun Yijia's point of view, even if her brother was disabled, he would not lose his position as an official. The problem was whether he could become an official close to the emperor. Little sister, I don't plan to continue being an official, Sun Yilin said very frankly. Sun Yijia's eyes widened and her lips trembled. She had always known her brother's ambition. Now, he said that he did not want to be an official. Was it as simple as the physical pain caused by the fire? Chapter 542. When Sun Yilin saw Sun Yijia's expression, he reached out and stroked her hair, just like when they were young. Even though it was a little overboard for him to do so at their age, even though they were biological siblings. However, neither they nor the people around them felt that it was inappropriate. It was just that the atmosphere now was inexplicably stifling. However, such a warm gesture did not seem to ease the tension. Little sister, I think I'm fine. Don't worry about me. However, how could she not worry about such things just because she said so? Sun Yilin looked at Sun Yijia. Even though he knew what she was thinking, he did not really care because she was living a good life now. Ever since she got married, her focus had already been reorganized. The people who made her sacrifice everything did not let her down. Therefore, she was worried about herself now. Even if she died, she believed that she would recover after a period of time. Of course, with her current situation, Sun Yilin would not deliberately do anything to provoke her. Brother-in-law, I'll leave little sister in your care. I'm going out for a walk. After all, I've left the capital for 2 to 3 years. Brother-in-law, don't worry. I'll take good care of Yijia. But, do you want me to send 2 people to go with you? Sun Yilin looked fine now, but Luo Jinghua felt that it was not good to let him go out alone. No need. After all, I've lived here for more than 10 years. I'm a man. I don't need anyone to follow me. Sun Yilin waved his hand, then called for his servant and left the Luo residence. Sun Yijia and Luo Jinghua looked at each other. With the tacit understanding between husband and wife, they seemed to be even more worried when they saw the worry in each other's eyes. Speaking of which, Sun Yilin actually had many friends in the capital. However, they were all just acquaintances. Using the word friend to describe them seemed to be an understatement. Therefore, it was obvious that Sun Yilin's target was not them. Sun Yilin was dressed in ordinary clothes. His honor was damaged, and the place he went to was not a place where people from rich and powerful families would easily set foot in. In this way, even if some things were to spread, people who did not know him would not know who the main character was even if they stood in front of him and listened to the lively gossip. In fact, the speed at which things spread would not be so fast. Sun Yilin went to the most ordinary tea house. He casually ordered a pot of tea and poured it into a cup. Sun Yilin seemed to not care at all. However, his servant's younger sister felt distressed at this time. He had been following Sun Yilin for almost 10 years. In his eyes, his young master was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. In the past, his young master used the best things to eat and wear. He was especially particular about drinking a cup of tea. For this kind of tea, he just threw a handful of tea leaves into the pot and mixed it with boiling water. He would not even look at it. Even the lowest servant in Duke Ding's residence would dislike it. But now, his young master drank it without batting an eyelid. There were also a few broken tables. There were no elegant decorations. This was a place where people from all walks of life could set foot in. In the past, his young master would hesitate to approach it unintentionally. But now, since 2 years ago, this kind of place was the place that his young master most often went to when he had nothing to do. His young master was clearly a person who should live on the moon and be like a celestial being. Sun Yilin inadvertently glanced at the servant's expression. It was just like the expression on his face. He knew what he was thinking. Sun Yilin picked up a salt-baked bean and flicked it on his face. "What are you staring at? Sit down." The manservant had a miserable look on his face as he slowly sat down. It was as if there were nails under his buttocks, and he couldn't sit still. He had no choice. He was a servant. How could he sit with his young master? If he was still in Duke Ding's residence, he would have been beaten to death. However, he also knew that in such a place, if there was a clear distinction between master and servant, it would be really eye-catching. Others would look at his young master strangely. However, no matter how many times this kind of thing happened, he still couldn't get used to it. Sun Yilin was too lazy to pay attention to him, because sometimes he really needed someone to do some things, and this servant had always been loyal to him, because even if he was a bit wooden, he would always keep him. Although there were no secrets in this kind of place, it was a good place to inquire about some gossip. Although it was true and false, Sun Yilin had already practiced the skill of removing the false and pure. He would always get some useful information. The situation in the capital and the struggle between the princes were not things that he wanted to pay attention to. What he wanted was some gossip. If he was lucky, he didn't need to do anything to know. If his luck was bad, it was just a matter of spending a little money. In fact, Sun Yilin's luck today was not bad. The table on the side was gossiping about Jin Qin Wang Fu. In the past 2 to 3 years, Jin Qin Wang's presence had weakened. However, Jin Qin Wang Fei could always create a topic from time to time. Sun Yilin's elbow was propped on the table, holding a teacup with a small gap. The teacup was a finger's length away from his lips, and he didn't move for a long time. Those who didn't know would just think that he was lost in thought, thinking too seriously about something and didn't respond to the outside world. However, as a servant, he was a little frightened at this moment. He finally understood the reason why his young master came out and complained incessantly in his heart. Why was young master still thinking about Jin Qin Wang Fei? There were so many good girls in the world, just like that Min Xiaoyu and Miss Min who liked young master very much. Why was young master so stubborn? That was Qin Wang Fei, No matter how much he thought about it, it was useless, Not only would he not get what he wanted, he would also make himself miserable, just like now. He was obviously very concerned, but he couldn't even ask openly. Why bother? Why bother? Why bother? However, no matter how colorful the servant's heart was, he didn't dare to say a word. He couldn't even tactfully express it. He was sure that if he said a word, he would be chased away by young master. Sun Yilin sat there for 2 hours. In this small tea house, this was quite rare because the people who came in and out were ordinary people. How could they be so free? It would be good if they could sit there for a quarter of an hour. Those hoodlums had the time, but how could they sit there quietly for 2 to 4 hours to drink tea? The people who came in and out didn't do anything, but the shopkeeper and the waiter looked at him countless times. Although the servant didn't feel his young master's obvious emotions, he still felt that it was very scary and trembled with fear. When he first went to Jiangnan, he was very busy because he was the only one by his young master's side. It could be said that his feet didn't touch the ground. Gradually, there were fewer things for him to do. Now, he could be idle most of the time, and his young master wouldn't be angry with him. However, he wanted to say that his young master was getting more and more difficult to serve. Although he didn't want to slander his young master, this was the truth. In the past, he could still figure out his thoughts. Now, he was unfathomable and unpredictable. Sun Yilin finally paid the bill and left. He didn't go anywhere else. He went back to the Luo family, took a book, and read it quietly. Knowing that Sun Yilin was back, Sun Yijia breathed a sigh of relief. Since he couldn't find out some things from his brother, he wanted to ask his brother's servant. However, the servant was very busy. Sun Yijia also understood that his brother was determined not to let him know more things. Therefore, he could only give up. Sun Yibin was committed to discrediting Sun Yilin. It was obvious that he didn't want him to have a chance to turn things around. Therefore, he spared no effort to spread rumors. At this moment, he completely didn't care about the family's dirty linen. Originally, Sun Yilin couldn't hinder Sun Yibin at all. However, Sun Yibin was narrow-minded, jealous, and loved to hold grudges. He would only stop when Sun Yilin was trampled to death. Didn't other people know this? They knew, and the number of people was relatively small. Even old Madame Sun knew, but she didn't stop it. It wasn't because she was disappointed with Sun Yilin and allowed others to trample on him. It was because she knew that her grandson now couldn't be hurt by rumors and slanders. Reputation could no longer bind him. Therefore, she coldly looked at Sun Yibin jumping around. A brainless thing. He couldn't see that Duke Dingwa Fu was in danger. He didn't do proper things and only thought of these crooked ways. Regarding Sun Yilin's matter, the people of Jin Wangfu had unanimously concealed it from Jingwan. In fact, Jingwan was also somewhat curious. That kind of curiosity was equivalent to facing a stranger. It was like knowing that something seemed to have happened to someone recently. Therefore, when she talked to people, she would naturally ask. That was all. However, Sun Yilin's identity was a bit special. She was afraid that a certain lunatic would find trouble with nothing to do. So she simply didn't ask anything. She didn't know. It wouldn't affect her. She didn't know, but Li Hanyuan knew. In contrast, his expression was not very pleasant. Because Li Hanyuan was very clear, once a person didn't care about his reputation, it would be a terrible thing. Especially for someone like Sun Yilin who didn't lack intelligence and wisdom. If he really wanted to do something, sometimes it was impossible to guard against it. For a person to have a big change, there must be a reason, especially this change in a short period of time. Li Hanyuan passed down the order to let people go to Jiangnan to investigate Sun Yilin's affairs in the past 2 or 3 years. It wasn't that he was making a fuss over nothing, but he knew that the other party was still thinking about his wife. He might not care about anything else, but only this matter, there was no room for discussion. He always had to be prepared. At that time, depending on the situation, if it exceeded certain limits, Li Hanyuan didn't mind secretly getting rid of Sun Yilin. It was not difficult to let a person die in an accident. After that, Sun Yilin stayed in the Luo family very obediently. He basically didn't go out. No matter how fiercely the people outside scolded him, this kind of thing could at most satisfy their mouth. Other than that, they couldn't do anything else. It wasn't until Duchess Dingwa's wife was about to be sent out of the capital and returned to the ancestral land for burial that Sun Yilin appeared. Obviously, Sun Yilin was furious and forbade him, a disloyal, unfilial, heartless, and unjust person, from holding his mother's coffin. He told him to get as far away as possible, not to tarnish the lintel of Duke Ding's mansion and damage the reputation of the Sun family. The others didn't have the same extreme reaction as Sun Yilin, but obviously, they all invisibly rejected Sun Yilin. Sun Yilin still had no emotion and just looked at Sun Yilin. Sun Yilin's scalp tingled under his gaze. How could he not be curious about the reason for Sun Yilin's change? He was gloomy and treacherous. His face was like a dead man's. No matter how good this kind of person looked, he would still make people feel that he wasn't a good person, not to mention that he was injured now. When they were face to face, Sun Yilin wasn't afraid of him at all, but now he inexplicably lacked confidence. If you're done, get out of my way. You. Sun Yilin's eyes widened. His graceful bearing was completely gone, and he looked very ugly. Sun Yilin lost his patience. He reached out to push Sun Yilin away and strode into the coffin. Then, when everyone was caught off guard, he reached out and forcefully lifted the lid of the coffin. When it fell to the ground with a bang, everyone came back to their senses. Sun Yilin, what are you doing? This time, Sun Yilin wasn't the only one who was furious. Sun Yilin turned sideways and looked at the angry crowd. His eyes finally changed and became gloomy and terrifying. "Get out!" The others seemed to be really frightened by him. Sun Yilin no longer cared about them. He turned around and stepped on the stool where the coffin was placed. The coffin couldn't fall to the ground before it was buried. Although it was early August, the weather was still hot. However, because ice had been used, Duchess Ding's body didn't show any signs of decay. Sun Yilin held the coffin with one hand and stared at Duchess Ding's emaciated appearance with half-closed eyes. In the end, tears welled up in his eyes and slid down his cheeks. After all, she was his biological mother. She had once given him the best of everything. Even if he had a strong desire for control, it couldn't erase her true love and devotion to him. Her initial illness was indeed related to him. Moreover, a person's death was like a lamp going out. No matter what she had done, what reason did he have to continue to blame her? Sun Yilin reached out his hand with a trembling hand and covered Duchess Ding's eyes. "Mother, I'm back. It's your son's fault for not being able to see you for the last time. If there is an afterlife," whether they were mother and son again or not, Sun Yilin seemed to be unable to continue. Finally, he said, "Please rest in peace." His finger brushed across her eyelids, and then he took his hand away. Duchess Ding finally closed her eyes completely. Sun Yilin clasped the edge of the coffin so hard that the back of his hand turned white. It seemed that when he reached a critical point, he loosened his hand indifferently. However, it was not only his hand that loosened, but also his nerves that had been tense all the time. Even if he tried his best to control it, he couldn't resist his consciousness in the end. He fainted in a very short time. Then his body tilted and he fell off the stool. The fall was not light. There was a moment of silence. Sun Yilin's manservant was the first to react. "Your Excellency." He hurriedly rushed forward and wanted to help Sun Yilin up. However, an unconscious man didn't know how to use his strength. An ordinary person couldn't help him up easily. "Come on, someone help. Call the doctor." Sun Yilin scolded the people from Duke Ding's mansion who wanted to help. "Why are you pretending at this time? You really think—" "Enough. 2 people go and help Yilin to have a rest. Call the doctor immediately." Duke Ding, who had been watching on the sidelines, finally spoke. After all, he was a duke, so his IQ was basically normal. Sun Yilin was indignant, but he still didn't dare to disobey his father in public. Sun Yilin was taken away. The trouble he made naturally had to be dealt with as soon as possible. Most of the servants of Duke Ding's mansion had to follow Fuling to the ancestral land of the Sun family. There were only a few people left. They were either unfavored marginal figures or existences like old Madame Sun and Duke Ding. Sun Yilin didn't want to leave. However, his mother had passed away. He was the eldest son of the legal wife. Others could leave, but he was absolutely indispensable. The death of Duke Ding's wife at this time was a big blow to Duke Ding's mansion and even Prince Kang's family. This was also what Sun Yilin hated most. He couldn't return to the capital city until 27 months later. People like them didn't need to eat, live, and sleep next to their parents' graves. However, during this period, they didn't need to go through the rites of the Duke of Zhou. They couldn't have banquets, drinks, and music. In fact, all these could be tolerated. If they really couldn't bear it, it was not impossible to be careful in private. The key now was that when they returned to the capital after 27 months, it might be too late. This was also the main reason why Sun Yilin was so irritable. Of course, his most important target was Duke Ding's mansion. He couldn't stay in the capital city, and the brothers of Duke Ding's mansion who could compete with him couldn't stay either. In this way, the loss could only be suffered by the imperial court. However, when he became Duke Ding in the future, he could get everything back. He felt somewhat comforted. Several other people who fought fiercely with Sun Yilin probably had similar thoughts. However, in Duke Ding's heart, he probably felt a little lucky that the person who died was not his mother. Sun Yilin didn't wake up until 2 or 3 days later. When he woke up, he seemed to have returned to his previous state. Duke Ding's wife didn't need to observe mourning for her adopted son. However, he had decided not to stay in the officialdom. Now that he happened to come back, he directly resigned. It was easy to find a reason, and his rank was not high enough to alarm Lu Qingdi. The Ministry of Personnel could deal with it. However, Sun Yilin was special. He had been registered with Lu Qingdi long ago. Even a job in Jiangnan was given by Lu Qingdi. If he wanted to resign, he would naturally inform Lu Qingdi. Originally, Sun Yilin rushed back after receiving the letter from the capital city, which was against the rules. However, no one really cared about this. Therefore, Lu Qingdi was not surprised to know that Sun Yilin had come back. However, Sun Yilin's resignation was more than a surprise. Lu Qingdi went to see Sun Yilin at once. After seeing Sun Yilin, Lu Qingdi's first reaction was the same. Was this really his honorable nephew? Lu Qingdi didn't ask Sun Yilin how he became like this. Yilin, I've always thought highly of you. Although something happened to you now, in my opinion, it doesn't have much impact. It's not as serious as your resignation. Thank you for your appreciation, Your Majesty. However, I only know outside that the past 10 years were a little narrow-minded. To tell you the truth, the injury on my body is not only on the surface but also on my lungs. The doctor said that if I don't recuperate well, I'm likely to have a chronic illness and shorten my life. So I thought that I might as well take this opportunity to travel outside. On the one hand, recuperate, and on the other hand, observe the people's livelihood. After a few years, if Your Majesty doesn't abandon me, I'm willing to come back and serve you. Sun Yilin slightly lowered his head and said unhurriedly. Lu Qingdi sighed softly. That's good. Anyway, you're still young. I'll take it as sending you to a foreign place for a few years. Thank you, Your Majesty. You don't have to thank me. When you come back, you'll have to make up for these years. Yes, Your Majesty. I won't let you down. Although Sun Yilin said so, only Sun Yilin himself knew what he was thinking in his heart. After Sun Yilin left the palace, he had nothing to do with the Qi Yuan's officialdom. Sun Yijian knew that this matter had been settled, so she didn't say anything. She always knew that her elder brother was an excellent person. Even if he didn't go into the officialdom, he could still live a good life as long as he wanted. Yes, as long as he wanted. The problem now was that she didn't know what he was thinking. Fifth brother, when are you going to leave the capital? Sun Yijia asked. After a few days of accumulation, Sun Yijia was able to calm down when facing Sun Yilin. Although Sun Yilin didn't tell her his plan, she knew that he wouldn't stay in the capital. In fact, there was no place in the capital for him to stay. The person who was worth staying in the capital was out of his reach. Therefore, if he stayed, he would only get endless pain. Therefore, Sun Yijia supported Sun Yilin's decision to leave the capital. In Sun Yijia's opinion, other than little sister Wan's matter, she could basically stand on his side for everything else. Didn't you call me big brother a few days ago? Why are you calling me that again? I'm more used to calling you fifth brother. If you don't like it, it doesn't matter. It's just a form of address. No matter what you call me, it won't change our relationship, right? Yes. You haven't told me when you're going to leave. I'll accompany you for the Mid-Autumn Festival. I'll leave after that, Sun Yilin said softly. Sun Yijia smiled and nodded vigorously. After a period of time, no one continued to add fuel to the fire in the dark about Sun Yilin. Moreover, it didn't cause any substantial harm to Sun Yilin. Therefore, gradually there was nothing new about it. In the end, the rumors died down. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.